Hello world, how's it going? I'm walking today in a little park called Fairview Knoll. For those who don't know where I'm at, I'm in Canada. I'm in a province called New Brunswick. My family lives here, so I often find myself in this city, province and country. Yeah, so it's a beautiful little place. Let's see if I can show you. For those who are just listening to the audio, I'm showing the sort of beautiful little, it's like a fake lake though, it's not, I think it was constructed. We do that here in Moncton. Hey, you know what, it's better to have artificial ponds and, well, not forests, they're not artificial, but water tables, let's say, than just pavement and parking lots everywhere. So it's nice to appreciate nature like that. Yeah. In any case, today it's much colder. It's kind of strange because we had weather, it was 34 yesterday. It was really hot, felt like 39 with humidity. And today it's kind of like 14, 15, which isn't cold, but you know, in contrast, it feels cold. So, yeah. Any case, it's not really weather that I want to talk about. The strange thing is, it's kind of dreary and just gray today. Whoa. Interesting. These kids. Yes. Thanks, man. There's a kid who's asking me, he's like, are you vlogging? I never thought of it as vlogging, but it really is. Video logging. To be honest, it just doesn't feel like me. And strange how some kids' comment can somehow make me reflect on what it is that I'm doing. And then ultimately sort of, I don't know. I'll be honest, my first reaction is discomfort. It's the last thing I kind of want to be, you know? Hold on, there we go. Yeah, I don't want to be a vlogger. That's not what I want to do. I don't mind making podcasts, and I am a filmmaker, so oftentimes you want to go and you want to film stuff, but the weather isn't nice or you have nothing to shoot, you know? So I figured, okay, just get behind the camera, you know, do these things, practice. I kind of wonder what you must feel, whoever's listening, if you have the same sort of kind of effect. Hold on. Like, do you actually see yourself in one way and then others perceive you as something different and you never thought about it? Do you care more about how they perceive you, or do you care about what you're doing? It's strange, because I just basically had that happen to me right now. I realize I guess I shouldn't care if people think I'm a vlogger. I know that's not what I'm doing, but for lack of a better term, that's might as well what I'm going to say. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, is there a difference between writing something philosophical and then speaking it through video? You know? I don't know. These are the kinds of semantic questions, I guess it's better for us not to go down those roads and ask ourselves kind of really the whole identifying with what it is that we do. It's not really the way to move forward, I've discovered. But that's how it is. And actually that sort of is a nice segue into talking about identity. Oh boy, identity, it's hilarious. We seem to have a problem when it comes to identity as individuals, as I've just sort of explained. You know, we identify with what we do. It's how we create some kind of character or personality about ourselves. We build up this image, this illusion, and we ultimately become deluded. It's a disillusion. It's a almost like a false image. And that scenario right there is a perfect proof of it. I thought I was just a filmmaker, you know, and a podcast maker and maybe a philosopher, but I get seen as a vlogger, you know, and that sort of disturbed my sense of identity to a degree. So it was interesting to reflect upon. In any case, as much as that happens to us individuals, I think it also happens to us as a society. And this is why we're going down the road of identity politics, you know. I made a video about that a couple weeks ago, and I was just frustrated because ultimately it's the last thing I want to be doing, but it touches me in every personal situation in my life. Every person I speak to, friends, acquaintances, family, you know, it's all you see. So you're always roped into that kind of conversation. Now you can always walk away, but then you have no one to speak to at that point. And that's not how you treat people. You don't just walk away, you know. And even though you want to, at the end of the day, you do have to face these things. So it's a very real part of our lives. We are going through an identity crisis as a society. So better to face it than run away, right? So even though I had made that video specifically on Facebook to tell people, look, this is what I think, this is what I believe, leave me alone, I'm not gonna talk about it anymore, I realized after the next couple of weeks and after many other conversations about this stuff, I realized it's important to just analyze it, digest it, and make your stand, I guess. Make your argument. Participate in society, you know, which is something that a lot of us kind of just prefer to withdraw from, and yet that's not helpful, is it? If you want to participate in any way, but you just want to participate in the good things, well, you know, don't be so surprised when somehow you don't fit in or somehow you don't get what you want, because you just don't deserve it, right? We're all in this together. It's hard for me to say that, because like I've always kind of, I guess, seen myself as the outsider, the person that's not included anyway. But a lot of that really is just from my experiences and my upbringing, things I had no control over. Ultimately, the only way to get out of that is to realize, I'm responsible for not continuing that pattern. Just because I started out that way doesn't mean I can use that as part of my identity and I can just continue that way. No, I can very well be a functioning member of society, you know. I know this makes me sound like I'm some kind of reject or misfit, which I am to a degree, but I think we are all misfits at some point. You know, we're all unique. We should honor that part. But there are portions of ourselves, pieces of our lives, let's say, that we can dedicate towards not fitting into everybody else, but to at least strive for accommodation and strive for peace. So if you're going to be living alongside people, you can't live alongside them and be a full-on loner, kind of, you know, recluse. You have to at some point make a decision. But there are people who do that, you know, real hermits that say, okay, well, I'm just going to go live on my own, be completely self-sustained. Now, this sort of self-sustenance that I was talking about, that I believe I feel I'm starting to learn, it doesn't mean like just financially, it means emotionally. It means even though I do need a job and I need people, you know, to do projects, I need, you know, institutions to help me survive sometimes as well. We like hospitals, for example. That doesn't mean that I can't reach some kind of independence as a human being. You know, there are multiple levels at play here. It's a bit more complex than just being independent or being dependent. You know, it's a mixture of both. So, yeah. All that to say, when you have a crisis of identity when it comes to your overall society, a lot of it falls back onto the fact that individuals have their crisis, and a lot of people group together thinking, well, we can deal with our personal identity crisis through a group effort, and that group effort is to equalize everything. No more individuals, that way we all fit in, and if everybody pitches in, we can all fit in easily without having to work for it. And that's something that I'm against, honestly. It's something I don't agree with. I think as an individual, you have to do the work. You have to do the work to, you know, first establish who you are, not through what you do and what you believe in and all these different things, but rather, it's hard to think about, it's very abstract, but, you know, establishing who you are or fulfilling who you are through your experiences by being open-minded and by understanding your weaknesses, your faults, putting yourself through tests, through challenges, trials, tribulations. If you go out there and you learn how you react to things and how, you know, you need to better yourself, that's ultimately fulfilling who you are becoming rather than who you are. It's not a static thing. You're not, you know, that one thing forever, and it keeps on adding on to it. You know, we do it that way, sure, but I don't believe that's the way we should do it. It's my personal opinion. We don't, we become rather than discover. You know, people say, oh, you know, you got to find yourself. It's like, no, you don't discover who you are, you become who you are. But that's, again, subjective opinion. In any case, to get a little bit more concrete, I wrote a piece today called The Real Racists. And it all sort of builds up to the idea that racists, they don't have any color, they don't have any bodies, they don't have names. They are ideas. It's where racism stems from, you know. Ideas. So, yeah. Have a read if you can. I put it on my blog. I'm going to plug it for you. It's called philosopherstudio.wordpress.com. Yeah, interesting. I might put a link to the video or under the video there for you to just click on it. And yeah, it basically talks about, I'm going to sit here actually. Tweet, tweet, tweet. That's an interesting bird sound. Never heard that before. All right. Oh, I'm still getting used to this gimbal thing, so it's just going every which way. Yeah, I wonder how much walking is really making me not speak too well. I guess it's as long as it's clear. In any case, what was I saying? It's really beautiful outside. Oh yeah, the identity thing. I don't want to look at it through too serious of a lens. I think, like I said earlier, I feel free. I feel like I can breathe now. And in large part, that's because I had to reconcile a few things in my personal life. And it's ultimately made me reconcile things in my public life. You know, our political opinions that we put out there is considered public life. The things you're willing to share on social media, all of that, that's ultimately your public persona. And I don't think people realize it wasn't always as intense as it is today. We've always had public personas, you know, back in the old days without internet or TV, which by the way isn't very long ago. People, when they stepped outside the house, their character, their personality, what they said, what they did, they were I think, more acutely aware that that's who their public persona was, and at home, that was their safe space in a sense, to just let themselves be who they are without any filters. And today it's in our homes. Today, stepping outside the doors every time we open up our phones, right? Every time we activate that webcam, every time we fire up the laptop. So yeah, public persona, when you have it all the time, it becomes a little bit blurry as to who you are and what it is you're saying. So we're less conscious of it now. It's just kind of strange. You know, we're not as acutely aware because public and private is just almost the same thing today. It's what people are doing, right? Taking snapshots of their food, of themselves waking up, like the whole shebang, right? Brushing your teeth, after sex, whatever. Oh, let's see if you can see that bird. I know you can hear it, but let's see if you can see it. It's on the very tip. It's at the very top of the branch. It's calling out. Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, so what does that mean? How does that fit inside the context of identity, you know, the whole private and public persona? Well, some of it is self-evident, you know. We know that if you become very, very public with your private life, your identity will take on the identity of the people around you, the people in the virtual space. Ultimately, you are what you share on social media. You are what you write, you are what you post in your photos. It becomes very visual as well, right? So imagine, trying to come up with a good analogy, but imagine trying to hammer a nail with a flat plate. You know, the plate is flat. It's not as precise as a hammer, you know what I mean? So it's kind of the same thing when it comes to social media. If you're just sharing something that you agree with, but the nuance of what you actually think, because you don't perhaps agree with it fully, or there's some details that could go along with that that'll change people's perceptions of who you are. But now you're just sharing something, you're not saying much, and then that represents who you are. That's kind of no bueno, you know. Oof, must be getting windy there. Yeah, it's no bueno. It's no bueno for developing, you know, and becoming who you are. So, yeah, I would say definitely steer clear from that if you want to at least separate your public and your private life. Because I think it is important to have that. Integrity. You know, to me, integrity really is not sharing with the world things that are intimate about yourself. You know, it's not to say that you should be uncomfortable with things about yourself. I know we're very liberal in our societies today. Wow, I've got rocks in my shoe. Yeah, you know, we're very liberal, and we think of being comfortable with our sexuality, comfortable with our ideas, although that's the one thing people are increasingly more uncomfortable, let's say, with, because they don't want to say their ideas and then get rejected by their own ideological group. But ultimately the idea is to be free, right? Freedom from this, freedom from that. And the irony is that the more freedom we try to the more freedom we try to gain, the more we impose restrictions on other people in order to support the freedoms we want to have for ourselves. And that's what this whole ideological warfare is all about. If you introduce the intersectionality of identity into the mix, you can better manage a hierarchy that'll secure your freedom at a specific, let's say, rung in the ladder, you know. So ultimately everybody wants to climb up to the top, of course. So it's an eternal battle between all the intersections, all the groups that are created by the intersections that we draw, fight for more victimized type statuses so that they can move up above other groups and enjoy social benefits. This, guys, is a very, very poor model to adopt if you want to become who you are. There's no adversity there. Well, there's adversity, but it's imagined. There's no substantial adversity, no substantial experience that challenges you as an individual, because the whole idea is to fight as a member of a group. So, you know, very sad, very sad. It's kind of like we think of Amish people as kind of extreme in comparison to us, and the reason for that is they're very homogenistic. So they all dress the same, they all do the same things, pray to the same God. You know, they can barely have any differences between them. Well, that's the road we're going down. We might think, nah, we believe in freedom, but you don't believe in freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of identity, truly, if you think we should all be classified in groups instead of individuals. Now, there's a lot of people who don't like this philosopher, but her name is Ayn Rand. People right away would say, yeah, she's not a philosopher, you know, which to me is an atrocious thing to say, because, you know, it's simply the fact that you don't like her ideas that makes you say that, and that's not an argument for why she's not a philosopher. In any case, she said things like, the smallest minority is the individual. The ultimate minority is the individual. And that, by the way, is what Western society is based on. And I'm really paraphrasing from Jordan Peterson here, maybe I can include the link to that as well. But Peterson says, it was very interesting, he said that Western society understood in the 20th century that we individuals are the ultimate minority, so you can't continue classifying groups, you know. Intersections are virtually limitless. You can have a woman, but then you intersection that with the fact that she's black. Then you draw another intersection with another person who's black woman who's also trans. Then a black trans woman who's also fat, right? We're doing the whole fat thing as well. Then we have a black trans woman who's fat who isn't very smart. It just goes on forever, right? A black fat woman, trans, who isn't very smart, who is an immigrant. You know, it goes on forever. So you get my point. I won't patronize you with more. The idea is, you know, the ultimate conclusion is the individual. If you keep drawing intersections, then the individual is that last person, that last minority. And all that's saying is, basically, it's saying something true about the nature of reality. We are all ultimately alone in our shell of consciousness, in a sense. We can't really share an essence with another being in that way. Now, of course, if you look at the Buddhist sort of more Eastern religions, they would say you can not merge, but become one with what I like to call the universal self. And I believe in that too. I just don't believe that you get there through separating people by trivial, very physical, very transit, what's the word I'm looking for? Transitionary? Trivial? You know, things that aren't permanent. Things change, people change. You know, these things have no impact, no effect. If you try to use our identities based on color of skin, creed, culture, all these things ultimately don't move you towards becoming one with the universal self, sharing an essence with all other human beings, and truly having the unification we all long for. This is a very, very existential kind of crisis. It's almost like a child waking up at the age of 6 and realizing they are their own selves. They have their own separation with everything else. They come into being. And ultimately, I think over our lifetimes, we can have many of these crises where we think, shit, I'm separate from everything. I need to unify. That's why we want to equal everything, equal. But it's ironic, because that's not how you become one with the universal self. Yeah, I'm sort of going around in circles. But the point is, if you want to become centered and unified with everybody, have peace, the whole thing, you got to move towards accepting the separateness that you have as an individual conscious being, physical being, and reconciling that with the fact that your conscious being is also part of one universe that ultimately shares a unified essence. That's the way I like to see it. It's a little bit more secular in a sense, less less bias. It's not any kind of religious undertone. I'm trying to really make it secular in that sense. We can all share that perspective. So I'm no different. I really try to look for not an ideology, but I would say an expression, not even an expression, a description of what it is we all feel inside. We are walking paradoxes. We are separate, yet we are one and the same with everything. We don't like that. It's too complex. We would rather it to be simpler. So anyway, that desire for things to be simple is kind of a dangerous thing. We don't think of it as dangerous, but it is. It's what allows people to go to war over what after the fact seems like some very, very immature, very primitive reasons. Like, for example, the Protestants and Catholics. I've been reading the book called Sapiens recently. It's the first of a sort of trilogy written by Yuval Harari. Read these books and you'll see. I've read all three, they're fantastic. But Sapiens is the one that I'm doing now. It's strange because it's the first book. Second is Homo Deus, and the third is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. I kind of read them backwards, so. But he really explains that very well in his book. He explains a lot of these concepts. So there's, if you value science in any way, then there is a lot of biological and historic evidence for a lot of what I'm talking about. There's an example where he says, the Protestants and the Catholics really were only fighting over the fact that Jesus basically came and died for our sins, so there's no having to sacrifice anymore. And the Catholics said, no, we still need to do rituals and sacrifices, and we still need to be in God's graces and work towards that. So that fundamental difference kind of is what caused people to kill each other in the name of a God who preaches to love your enemy. It's ironic, but that's what it is. Like I said, we are walking contradictions. We have what we call cognitive dissonance in psychology. And the great thing about this book, Sapiens, is that over the course of the chapters, you start to realize that he's making a case for that kind of, he's making a case for the fact that cognitive dissonance, as much as it causes problems, is also the reason for a lot of the solutions and the things that we've come up with that we want, that we like, that we desire, and that are good for us. So it's sort of like an objective. I mean, he has his biases too, you know, we all do. I think they shine through a little bit, but he's, as far as historians go, I haven't really read that many, to be honest, but he seems very, very objective, and it's why he's a famous public intellectual. A lot of people really watch that guy. So yeah, read his books, I would say. They're phenomenally valuable if you want to understand humans from a more encompassed viewpoint. And yeah, so again, I had written this piece called "Who Are the Real Racists?" No, "The Real Racists," that's the title. And I don't want to get into the statistics and into the whole black and white thing, but ultimately the debate as to racial differences as well as gender differences, and that really having an impact on our lives, I believe a lot of it is caused by us. The fact that we bring these things up. Now, I know it's easy for people to look at that and be like, "James, you're sitting there on your high horse as a white man with privilege," but I can tell you this, there are a lot of black people and other people, right? Doesn't matter what their color of skin are, who would say the same thing that I'm saying. And they've experienced racism a lot more than I have, right? So, but it's true. It's true. If you don't realize that even though you experience racism and lots of bad things and it's systemic and all this stuff, if you don't realize that the way out of that is to stop using racial metrics, right? It's very sad to me to think that you've suffered for so long from some kind of societal bias against you and all this kind of stuff. You would think, okay, I want to get rid of it. I'm done with that. Let's move forward. So you do have a tiny minority, and of course they're called racist. They're called Oreos, you know, black on the outside, white on the inside. People like Candace Owens, people like Larry Elders, Thomas Sowell, Cornel West doesn't really, I don't think, get called an Oreo, but he kind of is. He's half white, I think. Anyway, pretty light skin. The point is, it doesn't matter. These are black intellectuals who do have a voice, and they are counter to what a lot of people say. They're very let's say against the grain, and so they get called out for being racist against their own race. It's like these guys realize that this is an ideology. It's ideological warfare. It's not based in anything factual. So the facts are, as far as I'm concerned, if you continue using race as a metric to bring order to the world, to bring racism to an end, it's self-defeating. I mean, logic. It's logical. If you want to get rid of racism, stop being racist. It's incredibly racist to me to classify people. White man's at the bottom, you know, black man a little bit above, Hispanic, Asian, like that's racist to me. So yeah, it's just nice to be able to digest this stuff and kind of come out with it, say it, and explain it a little bit more calmly and with some thought behind it. And, you know, is there a flaw in my arguments? Sure. Can they be more sophisticated? Sure. But my attempt at being unbiased and clear really is in that piece that I wrote. And I ultimately have to learn how to articulate it when I'm speaking about it, sure. But I feel the more you learn how to do that and let's say, grow patience for people when they do bring it up, then you'll have a better time, convincing them that there's no reason for why we should be discussing this stuff, more than we have to, because ultimately we want it to stop. We all want it to stop. So to me, if you just gaslight and you just want to continue protesting, that's fine. But let's not let it take over our lives, because then more lives will be taken, and that's the point. We don't want people to die from this shit. And it's ironic that we're willing to have protests about saving black lives and ultimately end up losing more black lives because of the protests. Again, it's another cognitive dissonance. It's another flaw in logic that baffles me sometimes. But it makes me wonder, what are the things that I've been faulty in my own logic? What are the things that I've done and said? And what are the things that I still say and believe that is contradictory? It would have to take someone, I think, pretty witty, pretty sly to make me see it. Because I'm like a thinking machine. I just think my way into believing things. So as much as I can see the bullshit in other people, I think it might even handicap me even more when it comes to seeing the bullshit in myself. So that's ultimately why I externalize a lot of what I say. It's why I discuss things through a podcast. And the reason I do it publicly is because we care too much about our image. We're scared that it's going to ruin our lives. Well, here's the kicker. I don't have a public life. I don't have a job. I don't have a career. I don't have friends. Well, I have a couple very close, but I don't call them friends, I call them family. To me, friends is just another word for acquaintance. Everybody else to me is family, the people that I hold dear in my life. That's just the way I function. Hello. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, sort of lost my train of thought there. But the point is, when you hold friends close and you try to get them to understand some of these things, you can obviously lose your friends. So we would rather just jump on board with the ideological train, and before you know it, you become an extremist, a radical. It's fear of very rational things. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to lose your family, you don't want to lose your friends, you don't want to lose your job. These things push you further deep into being extreme. So it's like a Chinese trap. You put your fingers in and you try to get them out by pulling away, but it just tightens and you can't escape. So you ultimately have to face what you fear. You have to bring your fingers together, in other words. You have to face your fear, and then you can be set free. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to speak of. I have other things on my heart, but perhaps I should save that for another podcast. I don't know. Well, let's just say that when it comes to who you are, it can damage not only your relationships, but it can damage yourself. You know what I mean? Identity is something that here you go. Okay. If you've been listening this far, I'll give you a little bit of something that's kind of worth having paid attention to. Wow. I can't even speak properly now. I guess I'm flustered. I'm about to share something more personal. But if you have, what I'm trying to say is that if you've listened to me this far, it's kind of a little bit of a reward that I want to give you, which is to share something personal. I won't lie, at the same time, I feel as if though less people will be actually seeing this and hearing this, so it's almost comforting. It's like, okay, it's not like that many people will hear me out. I've been incredibly public with my personal very personal things in life. In a way, it helped me see myself, because it almost felt like I was so lost. I had no identity really to speak of, and in order to at least, I'm thinking in French now, there's no way to translate in English, but the way to locate myself in that fog was to try and externalize everything about myself, everything that I thought, everything that I felt. I would tell complete strangers. I would write them out and post them publicly. Things like my suicide attempt, my alcoholism. I don't consider alcoholism. Right, the film stopped, so I'm just going to continue